Welcome to Grappling with the Gray, a forum for promoting an ethical mindset and ethical decision-making to help us more clearly see both sides of complex issues and better navigate the moral challenges of everyday life. I'm Rabbi Jonas Goldson, suffering from a mild case of laryngitis, and despite that, we're going to push through. And I'd like to welcome my guest with me today is David Fink, who is a rabbi, lecturer, nationally acclaimed litigation attorney, educator, and moral philosopher. Monica Kreuger is founder and CEO of both Global Infobrokers Incorporated and Praxis School of Entrepreneurship. She also chairs the board of Luther Care Community and is a tech candidate chair in Saskatoon. And Mark O'Brien is founder and principal of O'Brien Communications Group, a B2B brand management and marketing communications firm, and host of The Anxious Voyage, a syndicated radio show about life's trials and triumphs. Thank you all for being with me today.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
And I will try to croak my way through the topic for today. After a recent visit to urgent care, I vented to my wife how annoyed I was by the doctor. It wasn't that she was ill-mannered or curt, just the opposite. If it is too much trouble, may I ask you to please remove your glasses? That's 15 words for what could have been said in 4. And if it were too much trouble, what wouldn't be? Please lean back for these eye drops. I don't want to stain your lovely shirt. I was wearing the same shirt I'm wearing now, plain white, professional but hardly lovely. She even repeated the line. Within minutes, I was grimacing the way you do when someone puts too much sugar in your coffee. My wife replied, "It's better than being rude." And she's right, of course. But is there a middle ground between being too polite and not polite enough? When politeness feels contrived or insincere, doesn't it end up having the effect opposite to what's intended? Or is it enough that someone is making the effort to be polite, even if they may be doing it imperfectly? One of the principles of ethics is to presume positive intent. But is intent alone ever not enough? The floor is open.
Go ahead, Mark.
No, please, David, go right ahead.
I would just open with a quote from the sayings of our fathers, which is, stay away from dishonesty at all costs. It's a good philosophy. And by the way, I have many contrary views on this particular topic, but this is just my starting point. I mentor a lot of young attorneys, and one of the things I tell them is that no matter how zealous you want to be, always be honest. And the reason for that is if you have a reputation for honesty, not only is it the right thing to do, but it will serve you well. The first Google review I ever got was from a fellow lawyer of mine who wrote something to the extent that he's really smart, he knows the law, fights like a dog for his clients, but has such a reputation for being honest that the judges give him the benefit of every doubt. And I think that's a good thing for people to think about, any one of us, is that we're honest. Just to contrast that, though, while I've instructed my kids on that lesson many times, and I'm proud to say they've absorbed it, I've also told them that when your 90-year-old grandmother comes down the stairs wearing enough makeup to look like Bozo the Clown, because she's getting ready for her granddaughter's wedding and says, "How do I look?" I said, "You tell her she looks nice. Nothing else is acceptable." So there are many permeations and ramifications of what we say and when we're saying it. My opening volley.
Well, that's a principle that's come up a lot lately for me, is that context plays a tremendous role in what is right and even to some extent what is true.
My first response or reaction, I suppose, to reading the topic today was to think about the expression from boxing that styles make fights. And obviously there are two people in the ring. So in the instance that you cited, Jonason, there was the person who was speaking to you, and then there was you as the person who was hearing that. And it made me think of a very recent experience. In late January, I was admitted to a local hospital and diagnosed with AFib. And I can only smile about that because I was at the electrophysiologist today, and I'm absolutely certain I will be fine. But I wasn't so sure when I was in the hospital. And the cardiologist who came to see me in the hospital walked in, leaned back against the wall, crossed his ankles across each other, and said, I just want you to know this isn't the effing thing that will kill you. And so I just smiled. When I was admitted, my heart rate was 145, 150, or something like that. And he said to me, if you had come to see me before going to the ER, he said, I would have given you some medication. I would have told you to come back and see me, and then we would have figured out what we're going to do from there. And he pointed at the nurse's station and he said, but those people freak out when they see triple digits. And as he was leaving the room, I called his name, Dr. Shani, and he stopped and turned around and I said, thank you for being such a straight shooter. And it occurred to me then that some folks may have taken issue with the way he spoke to me, especially since his first sentence contained profanity. But he may have sensed that I was quite anxious and just put me immediately at ease.
Yeah, I think there's also, I mean, I would much rather there's sort of a positive experience than I think you can be honest and be positive as well. But I think sometimes if someone, let's just say the person that you were speaking to in the hospital was having kind of a rough day and they felt, I can't let this out on other people. I'm going to be positive and I'm going to, be kind. And if you do that enough, sometimes that stuff that is behind that, what seems like
Mm.
insincere positivity goes away. But, all of us come from a place when we're in a communication with somebody we don't know and communication with people that we do know. And sometimes we put that face on just because the last thing we want to do is bring that feeling, whatever is behind the scene, to the person in front of us and give them a negative experience. So I think sometimes a context is everything. As you said, I think it's very true. Yeah. And the second point I wanted to think about is just as you were talking about, David, is when my mom was alive and we had her in the hospital in the last weeks of her life, she had dementia. And I was not happy with the conversations that went on with the medical staff at the time. My mom came from a time and place where everything was very polite, very, maybe you were always polite, even if you didn't want to be, but that's the generation she came from. That's the generation all those people came from. And they aren't used to being abruptly handled or, just told a truth without any context behind it. And I remember having to have some conversations about that. Take an extra minute or two, put a smile on your face. She has dementia, which means she's remembering back to her younger ages. And let's be kind. Even if you don't feel kind today, let's be kind. So, just some other thoughts to throw in the mix here.
You kind of remind me of an episode of House. I think I've probably seen one episode of House in my life, and this was it. A fellow came in with traumatic brain injury, which had damaged the part of his brain that controls the filter for what he said.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
And so he sent everything that came into his mind. His attraction to some of the nurses and doctors, his feelings about his wife and her intelligence level, and we would think of this as being completely rude, and it occurred to me there's a tremendous lesson in that being honest doesn't mean you say everything that's on your mind. It means that you recognize the circumstances you're in and what's appropriate for that circumstance. There's a lot of discussion in the world today about censoring and self-censoring. And self-censoring is a bad thing when I'm afraid to say what I think needs to be said because I fear the repercussions. But it's a positive thing when I recognize that what I have to say and what is on my mind is not going to be beneficial in any kind of a way. and therefore I limit myself in order to have the conversation proceed in a healthy direction. And striking the balance between these can be pretty tricky sometimes.
I have similar thoughts when especially when I'm in conversations with people, and the very popular subject of authenticity comes up. And David and Monica, when I invite you to connect on LinkedIn tomorrow, you'll see that there's a thing in my profile that says Master of Contextual Authenticity. And that came out of one particular Zoom conversation I was part of. And I apparently was the only person who thought like this, but I was very much in agreement with what you were just saying, Jonason, and very much in agreement with what you were saying, Monica, about the importance of context. And if you were simply, your quote unquote authentic self in all situations, I don't believe that could be appropriate, and that you have to make contextual decisions on the fly. So there was one gentleman on the call who actually was an MD, and he started laughing. And I said, "Well, what are you laughing about, Victor?" And he said, "I love the idea of contextual authenticity. I dare you to put that in your LinkedIn profile."
That's
Okay.
great.
But I think that's critically important. And I was also thinking earlier, Monica, when you were talking about having to put maybe the more difficult parts of your day behind you. Um, I wonder if all of us are equally good at that, or if sometimes trying to conceal that may come across as, I don't know what, false, contrived, insincere. I truly don't know.
Well, I would add in that I think the fact that we're having this conversation is something that everybody should really have going on in their own head at all times. Because what I would say is if you take things to the illogical extreme, we're not going to say good morning to each other anymore. Are we just exchanging a pleasantry, which is rote? Or are we really wishing the other person a good morning who we may not even know? We just happened to pass them in the elevator. But there's nothing wrong with saying good morning to people, even if it is just a pleasantry. And even if we don't genuinely mean the words, we just rather to mean to exchange a pleasant interaction. For that matter, the same thing can be said about many thank yous. How many people, when they say thank you, are really expressing gratitude, or they just feel it's the appropriate thing to say at that moment? And there's nothing wrong with that either. And several people have said things about context. I think I would put it like this. You have to keep in mind the difference between a pleasantry and substance. When it comes to substance, I think we owe all a duty, with the exception of the grandmother with too much makeup on. We owe a duty to be honest when we're talking about things of substance. But there's nothing wrong with being a pleasant person in general. We all like interacting with those people more than others, and we need more constructive, healthful, respectful interactions in today's world, even if it means putting a little bit of gloss on it.
Yeah, when you were talking about saying good morning, and you said even if it's just a pleasantry, the thing that went through my head was maybe especially if it's just a pleasantry, because we're willing to make that effort.
Exactly right.
I think on top of that too, you're talking about authentic self, Mark, and I was thinking, like, I don't always want people I don't know to see the authentic me, because
Yeah.
there's all ranges of me, and they're all stages of being, depending again on context. But I think having an ability to be civil and to be open and to be open to conversations and to learn, which inevitably is going to come back into who you are and help you evolve into a new direction. I think that those are all really good things. But I was at we had our 70th anniversary of the Luther Care Communities last year, and we had an elder come and talk to us about love. And he said, the word has disappeared in our day-to-day language outside of our families or friends or things like that. We don't use the word love in business. We don't talk about love of fellow man. We don't talk about, caring for the next person. We talk in very objective language. And so then trying to be authentic and I've tried to pull it into my way of thinking so that when I'm speaking to somebody, even if it's somebody I know we're not aligned, we're not in the same value mix, I still care for that person as another human being on this planet. And because of that, I want to try and be in a good place, in a good way when I have a conversation, even when we do not agree. And there are absolutely people in my circle I'm not on the same page, but we can have a good conversation about not being on the same page and really try to understand the other person's perspective in a bigger way than we would if we were just telling the truth, like, this is how I see it. And I think coming back to what you were saying, David, what is honesty? Like, what are we, when we say we're being honest and truthful, what does that mean? I think we're all still looking for truth. We've got so much noise and everything out there in the world today, like finding those places that make sense, and doing that in a way that's respectful with other people, to me, is a good way to go. And being honest in how we are in that moment, because we change. I change. I'll be listening to you people today and I'm going to go, oh, I never thought about that. And I'm going to put that into my mix. And that the next time I have a conversation, I'm going to add that to what my truth is and what my honesty is. So this is really interesting conversation.
And I was about to say, I love the way in which the two of you, Monica and David, have made me think about language because I absolutely love language. So first I started thinking about authenticity. Then I started thinking about a line between the things that occurred to me were guardedness and vulnerability.
Mm.
And so my first inclination would have been to think of guardedness as necessarily bad. Maybe it's the product of fear or something like that. But then it occurred to me as you were talking, Monica, guardedness could be a sign of respect. I need to be guarded about whatever I say to this particular person. Maybe because I know something might be offensive, maybe because I don't know that person very well yet. But so I'm just going to say thank you because I'd never thought about that before.
Mm.
Well, it makes me think of something that this is episode 143 of this series. And I can't think of a single time that I've had a guest use inappropriate language. Um, even words that are fairly commonplace. And since I have gotten to know some of my guests off mic, I know that some of them do use that kind of language. And I wonder if it's being in the presence of a rabbi.
It's not,
Mm.
trust me.
The voice of experience.
But I think to your point, Mark, that sometimes we do appreciate that the context is not, because I know there's one particular podcast host. He's excellent. He has fantastic guests, wonderful conversations, and I long ago stopped listening to him because the F word comes in once or twice in every sentence, and it's not so much that I'm offended. I'm just bored.
Yeah.
It has absolutely no meaning, no impact, and it just gets tedious to listen to. And what's the point at that point? Isn't it good for us to have a sense of propriety
Hmm.
so that we can hold ourselves to a certain standard? Monica, I wanted to touch on something you just said because you just made a connection for me I never thought of before. I'd like to maybe investigate it a little bit. Um, I am a devotee of George Orwell,
Mm-hmm.
and his focus on the power of language and the damage of corrupting language.
Mm.
And the word love, for instance, that you mentioned, I know even when I was a teenager, love was considered one of the most overused words in the language. And now you're saying that it's even falling out of use altogether. I wonder if, to what degree, the way language becomes degraded interferes with our ability to be authentic,
Mhm.
because we lose the ability. And in 1984, this is why they're creating a language called Newspeak. They wanted to eliminate words for concepts they did not want to be discussed or even
Mm,
thought of.
that's
They wanted to
really
reduce,
interesting.
they wanted to reduce thinking to the most elemental communication, like dolphins or bees, so that people could not think deep thoughts or think um, insurrectionist thoughts. And that are we really capable of presenting ourselves if our language has gotten so sloppy and so diluted that it's hard for us to be articulate?
Maybe it's because um, I'm a brand management guy, but I sometimes get in, at least initially, uncomfortable situations with clients when they want to use jargon or to rely on it too heavily for exactly the reason you just said, Jonas. And I take the acceptance of jargon, the prevalence of jargon, to be a degradation of language. And I know it starts out probably innocuously enough. Somebody coins a term, well, this is like verbal shorthand. Okay, fine. But then it gets so overused, it doesn't mean anything anymore. I'll give you one example, solution. And we work with a lot of software companies, and so they're always talking about solutions. And I tell them, look, if I create content for you, I'm only going to use the word solution if you convince me you're selling salt water or milk of magnesia. Otherwise, we can be much more specific than that, and the specificity will be a differentiator.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. I am also a fan of good language and specific language, and I do believe that when we get into, I'm gonna call, like, I work in the business area, I work with business owners, I work with entrepreneurs, and a lot of the language is very objective, right? It describes things, profit and markets and HR, and everything takes the human out of it when you listen to business language. And
Absolutely.
so when you hear when the elder was speaking about, we don't even use the word love in our business language, and businesses are what we do. Like, we're working, all of us are working in something, and we take away the humanity of it when we don't have words like love used in all contexts. And I went, oh my gosh. And when I had to give a little talk to the group afterwards, at the end of it, I mentioned that. And I said, I'm going to tell all of you, I love all of you in this room today. And you could just feel the room settle into a different place. Like there was like a sigh, or there was like a lifting of, I don't know, like kind of tension or something, that just felt like there was just comfort in the room all of a sudden. And the power of words, in a context like that, I just went, what have we lost? Like, where has the meaning, that the communication human to human, where has that gone? And words are a big part of that. We're risking a lot of that stepping into AI. Not that I don't use it for certain things, but we're risking a lot of that. Human context, human language, human touch. We're missing that in our language. So
Dave,
yeah, really important point. Hadn't thought
uh,
about.
and I'm sorry if I interrupted you, Monica,
No,
but
that's fine.
David, when Monica was saying that, I started being curious about how what Monica was just saying, how you see what Monica was just saying in the courtroom, and if you notice
Mm.
that kind of, I'm just going to use Jonason's term, that kind of degradation of language.
I do, and actually, that's one of the things that went through my mind. When I speak to jurors, I do something which many trial lawyers don't do. I thank them for their service. I thank them for taking days out of their lives to hear a case which they have no connection to. I know very well that it's compulsory. I know that they were summoned to jury duty, but there's nothing wrong with thanking someone for that. And just to Margaret's point that she was Monica's point that she was just making, when you tell a room full of people that you're teaching or that you're meeting with that you love them, I'm not sure that the relaxation you felt in the room is because they feel loved. I think they feel that relaxation because they see that the person talking to them is not afraid to be vulnerable
Mm.
and is not afraid to be earnest and relaxing with them. And to them, that puts them at ease even more than the content of what you're saying. But I would say also, to piggyback on Mark's last point, is that we don't all appreciate the impact that a single sentence can have to an individual. We don't know where that person's coming from or where they've been. When you comment to a young man that he looks really spiffy today and he looks really well dressed, you don't know that he got dumped by his girlfriend the night before, and that little shot of self-esteem is enough to keep him from going to the bar that night. And similarly, if you see a young woman who's been struggling with anorexia and you tell her how lovely she looks, that might be enough so that she doesn't need to go down the therapy route, but can self-heal from that point on. Because of exactly what all of you have been saying, everyone's an individual and comes from a different place. And again, I think it's so refreshing that people are actually having a conversation about this so that at the very least, these thoughts can go through their head each day.
And given what you were saying about business context, Monica, I was thinking as you were talking, I don't make a big deal out of it, but when I'm working with my clients, I don't talk about markets because that's abstracting. That's rather than dehumanizing, I'll say it's abstracting.
Mhm.
So first I will start to talk about audiences, and then I will start to talk about the members of those audiences. So they start thinking about people at an individual level. And I can remember when I started my business in 2004, one of the people who was with me at the time said he was from the Dominican Republic, and he always called me Chief. I have no idea why, but he said, Chief, people make emotional connections to brands. And I said, yes, I know that, but that's a really tall order in business to business, isn't it? And he said, yeah, but it's nonetheless true. And that's one thing I absolutely took to heart.
It's interesting too when the other big words that are talked about, and you reminded me of this, David, is vulnerability, which is often used in connection with authenticity, and it's one of the foundations of the tech groups, and one of them that I chair, where business owners come together and have a safe space to be authentic and be vulnerable. And I really love running the groups, and I really love having them become completely open in these groups and share in a way that allows them to connect with each other at a deep level. At the same time, I think about, why do we have to have special groups to do this? Why do we have to have places where people can't be, as you were saying earlier, David, honest and open with each other, um, and speaking the truth? And where and in business, not being able to do that, it's a lonely journey for owners to walk without having somebody that they can say, I have this going on, or I'm feeling this way about my business today. I can't share it with my company and the employees because they'll all think we're going to fall apart. Like there's this, at what level can you connect, that doesn't start to make other people afraid it's again, contextual, but if we were at a place where we truly lifted each other up as a regular kind of practice as humans, would we need that level of kind of safe space? We talk a lot about safe spaces today too, right? It's another phrase.
Yeah, and especially starting with colleges when it
Oh,
began as a term that meant you are safe from being confronted with anything that makes you uncomfortable.
yeah.
Right.
And that's really not what university is supposed to be for. You're supposed to be safe to explore and ponder and suggest and propose. And I wonder if the backlash has anything to do with the style of our current president, whether you like him or you don't like him. But he certainly does not have a style where he is concerned about giving offense.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-mm.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if in some way that is a backlash against this hypersensitivity that is associated with the term safe space.
And Monica, I also wonder if um, some people might struggle with vulnerability out of fear because, there's the whole thing about kindness, or we could extend it to vulnerability, Jonas, and we could extend it to politeness being interpreted as weakness.
Mm-hmm.
And, obviously our current president is not concerned about appearing weak either. Um, but I do think that's a sensitive thing for some people, especially if they've been brought up to not show any of that,
Mm-hmm.
to not show their emotions, to not express themselves. That's a tough thing.
I think
There's
one of the
a
things, sorry, go
well,
ahead,
just as
Jonas.
a historical anecdote. Apparently, John Paul Jones sailed his ship up to a fortress and got his guns ready and sent a message over saying, "If you do not surrender immediately, I will unload all of my cannonade on your position and destroy you." And he signed it, "Your most humble servant, John Paul Jones." That sort
It's
of
funny.
there's no contradiction in their minds about anything like that. Yeah, go ahead, Monica.
No, I was just going to say that one of the things I've noticed when people come together and can be vulnerable is as they start to incorporate, and it is fear, I think as they start to lose that fear within that group and they start to incorporate into that leadership style of theirs and it flows throughout the company. One of our members is very open now with all of the people in his company. They all know how the company's doing. They know where sales are. Like it's almost like an open book inside of that organization, and the culture is beautiful.
Mm,
And so the sharing is different now. And I think that sometimes people just don't know how to do it in a good way, and to be vulnerable and to be authentic, um, so that they can develop and evolve themselves as well. Because I think you're right. I think people have been raised to think that's not a thing you do. Like that's a dangerous thing to do. It's a weak thing. People can find your weak spots and go after them. And yeah, I think you're exactly right. So if there's an opportunity to help people find another path, I think it's a good one.
I want to share something in reference to what you said about telling that room full of people that you
Mm,
love them. And I want to lead that into a question I want to ask David. I don't know if you've ever seen this, but there is a television program on CBS. And the only reason I get to see it is that Paramount Plus runs CBS programming on its streaming. So there's a program on called Tracker. I don't know if you've ever seen it. If you have, I saw it, at least two people nod. I won't bother to explain it. And it's quite predictable. You can be absolutely positive that in any given episode, the hero is going to pick at least one lock and he's going to shoot at least one person. But the scenes that get me, and they're actually also quite routine, is that the people who hire him to track down other people feel guilty in some way that these people have gone missing. And the lead character, Coulter Shaw is the character's name, always says, I don't judge. And I wonder if the people in that room, Monica, felt what you were saying was, I love you. I'm not going to judge you. Given how you reacted to that, David, I wonder what you think about that.
Well, I think there's a lot there. I think one of the expressions that I use, I often, when I'm meeting with a group for the third or fourth time, and it's a group that I know, I have no reservations about telling them that I love each and every one of you. It doesn't mean that you, like me, don't have faults.
Hmm.
It doesn't mean that you, like me, don't have things we could do better or work on. What it means is that I'm accentuating the positive things that you have, the values that we share. And I think there's so much of that that we don't pay attention to. We tend to dance and play in the margins now. This person isn't part of the same group that I am. They don't dress the same way I do. They believe in a different God than I do, when in fact 90% of us, maybe it's only 60%, but the vast majority of us do believe in being kind to our fellow man. We do believe in a higher force in the world. And while there may be different ways of expressing that, I think there's an overwhelming balance that somewhere between 75 and 85% of the world population shares those values. But for some reason, we let the 10% guide us, run us, and control us. And I think because of that, there's a tremendous value whenever we're in a group of part of that 75% to express that we're part of a larger group, the larger unspoken group, the larger unacknowledged group.
We might consider, Jonas, and I'll throw this out, we might consider a conversation at some point about how it is that we are so influenced by those people on the margins that we forget about what you just said, David.
I
That
don't think it's a mystery at all. I think the people on the margins tend to be the ones who are the most passionate, they make the most noise. I've been wanting for quite some time to start a movement called passionate moderation.
Oh, I love
When
that.
I used to write for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, it's a typical metropolitan newspaper, very left wing in its political slant. But my editors were women who they had a strong measure of intellectual integrity. They wanted different positions being presented in the paper, even if they didn't agree with them. And my editor said to me once, "You know what I like about you? You're the only moderate I've ever met who doesn't sound flaky or wishy-washy." Because most moderates are sort of like, well, let's just sort of find a nice, comfortable place in the middle where nobody gets offended, as opposed to, no, I moderate my thinking, I moderate my speaking. I can be left on some issues and right on others, but I try to be balanced, and I try to be able to articulate a point with a certain amount of energy. And I think that's where the challenge is, to elevate. I don't know if elevate our volume is the right word, but maybe it is,
Mm,
to speak louder and still be civil
mm,
and still be respectful
mhm.
and let people in the middle know you don't have to be a silent majority, because if you do, then it's like what Sir Edmund Burke said, all that's necessary for evil to flourish is for good men to do nothing.
That's true. I really like what you said, David, about, I've written it down because I think there's a post in there, but dancing and playing in the margins. I think that's a really interesting description of behavior today. I think that's a really great way to describe it. I wanted to just, I guess, kind of go back to the how we connect with each other. And even if we don't know each other, I want to just bring up when I was in Texas with my son and his family. And my oldest son is such a connector. He is so interested in every person he comes across. And it could be, he took me to the airport, we're standing in the line, and he's talking to every single person around me at 3 o'clock in the morning. And because they're sitting there and they're slumped and they're tired, and I don't want to be this and that. And pretty soon he's talking, this person's talking about the store that they own, and he's in Texas, and well, I'd love it for you to come, and here we've got this kind of food. And he's talking to this person who's off to a conference, and we're learning all these little bits of life stories. And I absolutely love that. And I love that about him. But it is just these tiny little things we can do that if we were to amplify or elevate, can you imagine the difference they would make? I was in getting something the other day, and there was somebody who was stocking shelves, and they just looked so tired, and they looked so kind of like, I'm just really not enjoying this job. And I just stopped and I started talking to them and thanking them for the work that they're doing. And it's much easier for me to see what I need. And all of a sudden the eyes just brightened up, and they're having a conversation with somebody because they're meant to be invisible. Like, the people who are doing these things are meant to be invisible. And we need to feel really, I think if we just open up and we talk to, even one or two people when we're out that we've never met, and we're out wherever, and you may not know them, and it comes back to this pleasantry. They could say, well, you don't really know me, and you're not really being pleasant because of whatever. And I'm going, no, I'm genuinely, because I love you, I'm genuinely asking you, how is your day? How long, when do you get off work, and how long you've been working, and all of a sudden they'll talk about other things, and they're so happy to have talked to somebody. And I could see that, but we've stopped those things too. That's that
I think
human connection, right?
I think part of the reason for that is because we live in a time of extremism. You're
Mm.
forced to join one camp or another. I just remember just a few weeks ago, my wife and I were watching the evening news on the various cable networks at the start of the Iran war. And after 5 minutes of watching one channel, we'd flip to another, typically between Fox and CNN. And my mother-in-law walks in and she says, "Why are you flipping?" I said, "Because we always discuss the fact that 15 years ago, we would watch different networks to get the different spin. Now you don't get different spin, you get completely different news.
Yes.
What's
What
being
a good point.
reported, you won't hear anything about Eric Swalwell on CNN, and you won't hear anything about the starving children in Iran that are suffering because of Trump's bombing campaign on Fox. We just don't talk about the things that make our agenda uncomfortable. And every one of us, even as voters, are forced to choose between different extremes. And the sad reality that nobody gets is that it's the people in the middle that decide all elections. We need more people who are just well-grounded human beings to be speaking up and to be talking about what we really care about.
I started thinking about this when Monica was talking, but David, you just absolutely reinforced the point. I'm guilty of what I'm about to say. I talk and write about moving to the middle, moving people to the middle. Well, what if it's not a matter of movement at all? And given what you said, David, about the majority of people, what if it's a matter of recognition? If we can get
Exactly
more
right.
people to recognize that, we don't have to move anybody at all.
Exactly right. Couldn't have said it any better. And the last point I would make on that, whenever I need something to go back to see, am I being crazy? Am I being extreme? Where is my moral compass at? I always go back to Maimonides, who was one of the great philosophers of our time and a great Jewish scholar. And he writes in many places, the purpose of a person is to live a life that's balanced and middle of the road. Extremism of any sort is not healthy. Interestingly, Maimonides points to one exception to his own rule. The only thing he says that is not acceptable and preferred in moderation is anger. He says anger causes us to do things we don't want to do, say things we don't want to say, hurts people's feelings that we can't take back. But I think the idea of moderation is something that all of us have been talking about this evening. And I really do think that encompasses the vast majority of people.
Mm,
And it's
amen to
interesting that
that.
in the last few elections, nationally, people have reported being increasingly dissatisfied with the choices available.
Mm.
And yet, 97% of the country still votes for one of the main party candidates.
Yeah.
There's this line that I frequently, I can't remember the last, no, I can't remember. Last time I voted for one of the mainstream party candidates, I think it was in 2012, maybe. That people say, well, you're wasting your vote if you
Mm.
don't vote for one of the mainstream candidates. I'm wasting my vote if I vote for somebody who's not, I don't believe is fit to be president.
Right.
And
Yeah.
yet it is such a hard sell.
I
Oh, the
would
same
push.
thing happens in Canada. The same thing happens. We have more parties, but the same thing happens. People say, I need to have a strategic vote.
I would push
What does
strongly
that
for a
mean?
constitutional amendment where there's a lever on every ballot that says anybody else, because they would win.
Yeah, my husband's often talked about having somebody at the very bottom, having at the very bottom Joe Blow or like something,
Yeah.
anybody else that should be on there.
Yeah, well, Bill
Most
Buckley
people,
said if you took the first 435 people in the New York City phone book and made them put them in Congress, they'd probably do a better job than the people who were.
most people are
Yeah.
unaware that the person who comes in fifth or sixth place in just about every single presidential election, do you know who it is? For like 40 years in a row, the person who comes in fifth or sixth, year after year, election after election, is Mickey Mouse.
Oh my
That
gosh.
people,
Wow.
that people write in.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
I thought you were going to say Alfred E. Newman.
There you go. Same idea. I think Alfred's down at number 19 or something. But
Wow.
That's
Wow.
incredible.
All right. Well, that's definitely Mickey Mouse information. So what have we? How can we leave on something positive?
so I'll throw my hat into the ring first. I've never met Monica. I've never met Mark, and I've never met Rabbi Golson. I've talked to him once or twice before, but all of you are virtual strangers to me. And we took a topic which can be extremely volatile, which has many different aspects to it. And I think we came to a very strong consensus of how decent people think. And I think it reflects very strongly on where the bulk of people really are. And we need to stop letting extremists on either side, left or right, control the agenda and be more vocal and be a safe place where people can come to know that society is not that bad after all. We just need better people running it.
Mm.
I will admit to being strange, but in this group, I don't feel at all like a stranger. Um, and Jonas, and I'm just going to give you credit for this. I've participated in these discussions many times. I've never, ever been uncomfortable. Didn't matter what the topic was. It's always joyful.
Yeah, it's one of
Yeah,
my
and I think
favorite.
it's
Go
really
ahead, Ron.
important that we've talked a lot of different aspects of this, but I really think that the two things that stand out for me, in addition to meeting all of you, is the power of language and the importance of context. And that we really have to think about how we want to connect to each other as humans in a good way.
And I just, to get us all the way back to the initial topic, I wonder if we substituted the word genuineness for vulnerability.
Hmm.
I'm sorry, for authenticity.
Hmm.
Genuineness
Hmm.
for authenticity. Um, I think, Jonason, maybe the exception you took to that person in the emergency room was that she didn't really come across as being genuine. It may have been a little bit put on.
Yeah, yeah, and then of course there's always the possibility that could have just been her personality,
Well,
and
sure.
she might have been very genuine.
Yeah.
There's also the possibility that your shirt really is that nice.
Bingo.
Maybe she was on psychedelics and it looked all swirly and pink.
Oh yeah. Well,
Maybe it's time to wrap things up with that thought. Uh, but thank you all. It's really been a delightful conversation. Appreciate your time, your input, and your thoughtfulness. For those of you who are watching, if you have a topic you would like us to take up in a future episode, please go to my website, ethicsninja.com. Use the contact information. Submit your idea if it's compelling. We will definitely use it in a future episode. And if you would like access to the backstage conversations that often continue after the main part of the program, go to my Substack. Look into becoming a premium member. You can gain access to those. For now, David Fink, Monica Kreuger, Mark O'Brien, thank you so much. And as always,
thank you.
we encourage you to continue grappling with the gray.